And after that, I took a gap year and researched here at Elvang also. Went back to get my master's, graduated in 2013 with a master's in physics education and math education, and a certificate to teach both subjects. Currently, I am in my second year of teaching high school physics in Arlington, Virginia.
So my name is Henriette Elvang. Can you hear me? All right. So I'm a professor here at the University of Michigan. It's my 6th year here, so my voice can hopefully fill the room. I grew up in Denmark, and I had no clue about science or math or anything like that growing up. I had no idea I would end up like this. Who would know? So I took physics, chemistry in high school, got really excited about it, went to college in Denmark, did a bachelor's and master's degree, and as part of that I spent a semester in Scotland also studying physics. And then I was really ready to get out of Denmark in Europe and came to the US and did graduate school in Santa Barbara. And after that I went to Boston, where I was at MIT for 3 years as a postdoc. And then I went to New Jersey, Princeton IS, Institute for Advanced Study, where I was a postdoc for 1 year before coming here to Michigan. And I love it here. The things I enjoy are research and teaching and meeting all these great people. And outside of physics, you can probably get me involved in any kind of sport or all this silly thing that you like. So,
hi, my name is Renee Goertzen. Before I decided to become a physicist, I got a degree in German literature and trained as a chef. And then decided I wanted to do physics, so I went back and got another bachelor's and a PhD. I studied physics education research, so how people learn and teach physics. And I got my PhD at the University of Maryland, and then I did a postdoc at Florida International University. And after that, I thought, I wasn't sure I wanted to go into academia, so I went sort of into industry. I work at a nonprofit, the American Physical Society, where I direct programs on education and diversity for physics departments and physicists. And I really like my job because I get to see the people that are impacted and the results of my work every day.
Hi everyone, my name is Bita, Ghaffari. I was born and went to high school in Iran. I then came here for undergraduate, went to a relatively small liberal college, liberal university down the way, over there. Got my dual degree in physics and math. From there I came to the University of Michigan. Got my PhD here in atomic physics. You know all of this, you heard it this morning. Anyway, so then I did a postdoc at Rice University, and then decided to change paths, and I have been at Ford Motor Company as a technical specialist for 15 years.
Okay, that's me. I'm Linda Gaines at Argonne National Laboratory. I've defined myself as a systems analyst, and I'll get to what that means to me in a minute. And I've been working on a variety of different kinds of things since I got to Argonne, ranging from looking at verification of the Chemical Weapons Convention to recycling of vehicle batteries at this point, and looking at things like how you can keep lithium-ion batteries from causing explosions and lead acid smelters when they get there. So fun stuff. But I mean, that's not exactly clear how you get there from physics. So I started out by not wanting to be a teacher because I thought it made no sense whatsoever to me to spend 20 years learning stuff that you then regurgitated back to new people who would learn the same stuff and teach it to people. So I wanted to get some new knowledge into the picture. When I was in 10th grade, I was absolutely entranced by the logical way that the periodic table filled in all of the orbitals and stuff, and so I decided I would be a chemist. And so when I went to college, I was majoring in chemistry, and junior year I had a choice of taking quantum mechanics either in the chemistry department, where you had to calculate all the molecular orbitals and it was really messy, or taking it from Norman Ramsey in the physics department, where it was really nice and elegant, and didn't conflict with the string quartets of Haydn and Mozart course that I wanted to take. So at that point, I became a chemistry and physics major. And I went to grad school in physics, had a Maser spectrometer. That's a schematic of what the experimental setup looked like. And then it came came time to get 2 jobs because I was married to a high energy physicist who needed to be near an accelerator, and we really didn't want to do the commuting from one place to another bit. So one of the places that I was looking for jobs was the University of Chicago, and there was a spectroscopist there who was doing really cool work, so I went to interview with him, and I liked what he was doing, and he liked what I was doing, and he said, that's really great, but I don't have any money to do that anymore. And I was leaving, and there was this great flow chart of how you start with steel in the ground and make cars and then recycle them. And I said, gee, that's cool. He said, oh, you want to do stuff like that? I have money for that. You want a job? So the first thing I did there was looking at the differences between coal and nuclear power environmentally and economically. And we ended up writing a book which was published within the week of the 3 Mile Island accident. So that was really weird. And the book sold, 6 copies or something total. Now, so this is what I do basically. In one word, what I do is think, in that there's a problem out there, and the question is, how do you solve it? And you've got to apply all of the physics principles that are relevant, and any other discipline that happens to be relevant. So that could be economics, or chemical engineering, or law, or it could have to do with politics as well. And the important thing is to try to figure out which are the pressure points, which are the things that are deciding whether this is going to happen within the bounds of science. And what makes that particularly fun is that a lot of these issues are public interest issues. And so there are people who are writing and speaking about them who, let's say, don't really know the facts very well, but they have very strong opinions. So it gets to be an interesting job. And I think that's all, that's as far as this goes.
Okay, so now we open up the floor for questions for any and all of our panel. Yes, in the back.
So I have a question for you.
Which you?
Me,
you or Harry you?
No, Harry, you.
Okay?
Linda.
Oh, Linda. Okay. So Miss Linda, when did it hit you that you wanted to? So how did you? So you were talking about the fact that you were going to take some classes and then you figured that you were interested in physics. But what really was that element that made you choose to major in physics and chemistry for your undergraduate?
Well, I did start out in chemistry, and it was in 10th grade when I learned about the periodic table that really was the turning
So
point.
what's the periodic table? It's
Yeah,
the same
and
thing?
the
Okay.
difference between chemical physics and physical chemistry is difficult to define, so I either one works.
Okay, okay.
I have a couple questions, but what's the difference, and this is to anyone who's done what I'm about to ask, what's the difference between working, not necessarily going to school, but working in Europe or another country as opposed to working in the US? And my other question was specifically for the girl from APS, going into industry, or going into industry, or specifically something like doing outreach. What if you choose you want to go back into research, but you've been doing outreach for a while? Like, is that even possible? Those are my questions.
Let's start with the first one about working in Europe versus the US.
So as the European, I guess I'm gonna start. So the science is the science. The goals are typically the same, but the styles can be quite different in terms of how people approach it. And this probably also varies between different disciplines in physics and other areas. So I think in the US, when people give talks about their research, they really want to get the idea across, and then the details are something we can talk about afterwards. Whereas what I see in Europe is more like, let me show you all the details now. And so I really like the US style. It gives me an idea what people are doing, and then I don't pass out after. Not that I would ever, have you ever experienced that in a class or anything? I'm gone, next 2 weeks. And that doesn't happen so much in the US.
You lose your job if you do that sometimes.
Well, I mean, it depends, yeah. So there's a different work culture, I think. But I don't know. My bias is I really like it. I went here in 2001, and there have been interesting offers of jobs in the U.S. I looked at when I was choosing my second postdoc. I had an offer from CERN, which is an amazing place to do science, and it was very tempting. But I really like being in America. So it doesn't really answer your question. I think there are many ways of answering your question. There are different styles in different places. But so is the same for the U.S. California is different from the East Coast. There's a different way of doing science.
Second question.
Yeah, the second question was regarding
Switching
working in
between-
industry or particularly outreach, and then choosing, hey, I want to go back into research.
So, I'm gonna broad strokes here. I think you can switch anywhere, but I went from German to physics. So, I think if you're thinking about making that switch, it depends. You need to not assume that the switch will be easy, but that it can be done. So it might be that if you were in outreach, that you would need to start doing some research on your own, attending conferences on your own to rebuild those connections. If you were in industry, for example, and you thought you might want to go back into academia, then start thinking about how you can do some publishing so that you can start to make those connections before you just jump back.
Okay, another question? In the front here?
Have you guys experienced any difficulties in gaining respect among your male coworkers or just other coworkers in general, based upon your gender or anything like that?
I have not experienced anything for gender, but I did physics education research, and I knew a lot of physicists that did not think I was a physicist. It helps now that I work for the American Physical Society.
So I've never experienced anything that I found offensive. So something that I took personal in any way. I think the best approach is that you take yourself seriously, you take your work seriously, you take responsibility for your education and your research and what you do, and you become an expert in something, and people will respect you. And so, you stand your ground, and you trust yourself. So I think that's really important. If you set yourself outside and look in and say, wait, maybe he said that because my hair is long, or maybe, then you distract yourself from what you're an expert in. And so keeping your focus that way, I think, is very important.
I have seen offensive behavior. Sorry, Henriette.
I'm sorry.
No. But I realized that it was more about the person who was being a jerk to everyone. It took a while to figure it out because I was a woman from Iran. I was unsure. I was like, he's being mean. What is going on? And it took me a while to realize that, oh, he's a jerk to everyone. But he likes picking on me because I react. Because I'm And so I had to learn to just, he doesn't exist, what he says is not important, and always make sure that it's not really about you being a woman. It could be that he's having a bad day. It could be that he's a jerk. It could be that he just, decided to make a point of view to prove to others that he's a big guy. So pick your battles carefully. But so then having put that in there, no, I haven't really.
And I think that's a really good point to make. There are jerks, but there are jerks in all sorts of areas. Whether it's physics, there are also jerks. There are women who are jerks in women-dominated fields, and who just behave that way. And so, if somebody is acting in a certain way, trying to really strongly make a point, it's not necessarily about you. That he actually behave that to everybody. So an example, I was visiting a famous university a while ago, where I was in a room with two famous physicists, and one of them is Russian and very sort of aggressive style. And so at some point he was at the blackboard, and he was like, I'm really just telling you what you should already know. And the other guy, who was quite famous, and we just kind of looked at each other and we kind of laughed. Because it's just the way he is. And he's really smart and we respect him, but we just kind of have to take all that blah, blah, blah with a grain of salt, right? All that sort of in your face with a grain of salt. And so I think that's important. Don't let that distract you. Some people have their different behaviors, and it's not necessarily about you.
There was one thing that used to happen to me when I used to call people up on the phone to try to get information from them, and I don't know whether this is gender-based or not, but what I found is that if I called up some guy at a company and wanted to find out about, I don't know, engine specs or material composition or some technical thing, I did a lot better if I said it was Dr. Gaines that was calling, rather than just sounding like some woman who was calling or some other person. I mean, it may not have been gender-based, but I always got the impression that if I didn't use the title, they thought maybe I was somebody else's secretary.
So I think that nowadays, from my experience, graduating in 2011, that the gender bias has become a lot more implicit, a lot harder to kind of put your finger on. And I've encountered less people saying explicitly, you shouldn't do physics because you're a woman. No one's ever said that to me, but I think there's something to be said for sitting in a large lecture hall and trying to learn physics, and when you look around, you don't see many other women also trying to learn physics. And for me, it was just kind of weird. It was weird to feel like I was in the minority. And was I doing something wrong because I was the minority? Was I in the wrong place? Did I not belong there? Which I think is why, for me, the Society of Women in Physics was so helpful to carve out that space where I felt really comfortable being a physicist and being a woman, where I could surround myself with fellow women who were nerdy, but also had social skills, who enjoyed physics. And I liked that interaction. So I don't think it's necessarily always the jerk guy. I think a lot of guys actually have really great intentions. And it's more so the social space that we're involved in by being a minority in many cases. And how do we deal with that? It's the big question.
If I can follow up a little bit on what you said. So for all throughout my postdoc and a couple of years into when I was working at Ford, I refused to have my signature file say PhD, because my thinking was either you respect me because I'm awesome or you don't. But the problem is, especially in industry, you have to email people out of nowhere and say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I have a question or I'm trying to follow up with something. And some of it is not the meaningless. I don't know whether they can look at my first name and tell that I'm a woman or not. However, it is a question of, are you worth my time? And that's a terrible thing to say, but I put that PhD after my name to make sure that they knew that they need to email back, hopefully, and do that. So some of that is establishing that, you are a doctor, you are a physicist, and the reaction, it might be that they're making a presumption on most women are not physicists. And maybe you can't forgive them for that, but maybe you can, because most women are not physicists, or they don't have doctorates, and so maybe that's okay.
So for those of you with dual degrees, how would you say that's helped you? What doors has that opened for you, and would you recommend it? Especially the physics and math, because that's what I'm getting.
Yes, it's been very helpful. I mean, so I feel like I was able to get through grad school better because I had taken enough math to be able to do that. And I feel like I can do some of my job at Ford better because I have that background. So it's not something explicit that I think to myself, wow, I'm glad. In fact, there are some integrals that they teach you when you take classes, and I never thought in my life that I would forget them. And I distinctly remember, like 3 years ago, I had to do one of those, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to look this up. Embarrassing thing. But you have the training to kind of carry you through. So if the more number of courses you have to take is not really going to be a burden, I highly recommend it.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll add, it's not, to me, in my opinion, the check mark that you get a dual degree. It's what you do. It's the courses that you take and what you learn from them. That's the important part. So I would say if there's something you're really interested in taking another physics course, and that means that you're missing one course to get a math degree, if that's really, that course in physics is really important for you, for what you want to do henceforth, by all means do that. It's not the check marks, it's what you learn.
In projects that involve people from other countries, other than like a language barrier, are there any communication challenges in thinking styles, attitudes, or methods that any of you guys have experienced?
So I have a lot of collaborators from other places. Pretty much everybody who goes through a PhD system will speak English pretty well. But of course there are various degrees, and I think for the one-on-one conversation, you can make up for a lot of accents by keep asking and clarifying. It can be difficult when people are giving talks, sometimes to understand somebody from a different country. They have a strong accent. But otherwise, communication is typically done in English.
So I think it also depends on whether you're dealing with someone who has a PhD in physics or engineering versus someone who's maybe more in the management role. I mean, I'm not saying that those are not people who also went to management, but I think I do feel like sometimes men from non-US, non-European countries tend to perhaps assume that women are not as technically savvy. Having said that, I think my major cultural problems comes in when experimentalists talk to theorists. That goes across the board. I mean, and it just happens that a lot of the computer-aided engineering people at Ford are Chinese. It just happens that way, and a lot of the experimentalists are American. But I gotta tell you that different terminology, when computer-aided and predictive people talk about experiments, that drives me nuts. Because they're literally talking about experiments on their computer, and that's not the right word to use. So I say that because I see the American CAE people do the same thing. So there's a little bit of, I don't joke around when I meet someone who's not a US male for the first time as much. I need to figure out how Japanese or how Chinese or how, whatever they are to some extent. So there are certain limits in that regard. But I have to admit that it's mostly about field more than it's about culture, at least what I've experienced.
So I know you touched on it earlier, and it's been touched on, but like that moment of doubt when you're like in a class and you're like one of 3 women in a class of 27, and you're like, should I really be here? Or, do I really belong in this PhD program while I'm handing in my thesis? Like, how did you get over that moment of doubt? How do you do that for other women and students for the future?
So, if you haven't heard of imposter syndrome, Google it. It's the feeling when you're an underrepresented group that you don't really belong there, and soon people are going to discover. And I think, I can't speak for everybody, I know a lot of people who have felt that way. So sometimes just knowing that other people feel that way, and that they're all faking it and surviving, and then eventually you fake it enough and you realize you do belong, helps quite a bit.
I also, with my students, I talk very explicitly about risk-taking and doing things that are pushing your own comfort zone. And everyone has kind of their own limitations, their own comfort zone where they feel really, cozy in there, and I'm okay, I'm safe here. And then those decisions that really push you beyond what you think you can do. For me, that big hump was research. I didn't think I was a researcher. I didn't think I was smart enough to research. I didn't have the technical skills to research. But I ended up researching because I needed a summer job. And it turned into a thesis, which turned into a gap year, which turned into where I am now. And looking back, there are very few risks that I took that I now regret. And you're never going to know if it goes really well or if it goes really poorly until you try that. So for me, it's always pushing myself to take that risk and following what makes me happy. If what makes me happy is physics and researching, then I'll keep doing that.
sitting in a class of 27 and you're one of the 3 women, can you think of it as, wow, I'm awesome? Seriously, I mean, do really think about the fact. I remember a friend of mine had this really good point. She was also a physics major, and she said, I know equality has been reached in physics when you have as many mediocre women as you have mediocre men. So think about it, you know, you are dealing with women that are perhaps better than average, trying to make it in that field, and I think it's really, really important to do that. And I think it's also really important to know that everyone feels that way. I can tell you last year, there was at least a few days that I felt that way. And this is a little out there, but it's just your thought. It's just your passing thought, sitting there and saying that to yourself. And your thoughts are not as important as you think, because you're gonna feel different in 5 hours when you've had a chocolate pie. Everything's okay. So I totally understand what you're saying, because I've experienced the pang of, oh my God, they're gonna find out that I am not as good as, you know, or I'm dumb or something. But just remember that your thoughts are not facts. They can go away and they can be okay.
So I just always wondered where everybody else was. So that was the right place.
I agree with that. I mean, so the background is also, I grew up as the kid who was out playing soccer with the boys, because those were the ones who played soccer and I wanted to play soccer. So it was not mysterious for me when I came to university or in high school or whatever, and it had to be pointed out to me sometimes if I was the only woman in the class. It was just, okay, well, what were we doing? So think of that. I think that's a good attitude to take. Instead of saying to yourself, do I belong? What am I doing here? Who are all these other kids? You don't say, it's awesome, I'm here. I'm not like the other ones. You know, let me kick their butts. Go do it.
Just a comment. We have a separate panel later this afternoon on experiences as women in physics specifically, so this panel is supposed to focus more on career. Great questions. Back corner there.
I was just wondering, you didn't mention this, the woman from Denmark. What is your research area?
My research area is theoretical particle physics. So I study aspects of the theories that describe particles. So there are really 2 branches of this. One is very closely looking at the experiments, trying to describe the phenomenology. And then there's my kind, which is the kind that try to study the mathematical properties of these models. So I've even worked with mathematicians in some cases.
I have kind of a 2-part question for Kate. When you first started studying physics in college, did you see yourself becoming a high school teacher at the end of it all? And also, do you feel like you're more prepared to teach in the classroom, even though you don't have that like classical like classroom management and like syllabus preparation skills? Do you still feel like you are equally as prepared to teach?
Those are really great questions. I did not think that I would become a high school physics teacher, but I'm really glad that I am. I wanted to be a doctor, like all of my friends in high school wanted to be doctors. And when I got to the University of Michigan, I looked at kind of the pre-med track here and realized how much how much chemistry and biology you needed for the pre-med track. And I just didn't enjoy those subjects as much as I did physics. So I switched over to the physics department, and I liked my classes a lot more, so I knew I was in the right place. And then I started to realize that I really enjoyed tutoring other students once I got up to the higher level physics classes. Really like to help them understand the introductory physics courses. So I said, I like 2 things here, I like physics and I like working with people to help them understand physics. So I mushed those together into being a high school physics teacher, and I have absolutely no regrets about that. To expand on that, in my junior year, just to make sure that high school physics was really where I wanted to be, I started to get myself in the high school classroom. So I volunteered, I shadowed teachers, I just observed, which most high school teachers are very open to you coming in and observing or volunteering. And I even explored elementary ed for a little bit, just to make sure. It was not for me. No. So that kind of confirmed that that's really what I wanted to do. And my biggest concern was that I would have to give up the rigor that I loved about physics. That I liked the challenge of those hard problems. I liked that I didn't understand everything quickly and that I had to work really hard for it. And I started to get into research, physics education research. I focused on the gender gap, studying gender issues in our introductory physics course this year. And I realized that I could take those techniques that I was doing at the college level, those research techniques, I could just take them to high school. I can do them in my classroom. So just yesterday I was analyzing a survey from my students, and sure, I don't have as big of numbers. That would be really nice if I did. It's not statistically significant. I'm not going to publish these results in a scientific journal, but I like it. I like that analysis, and I like that I can do that in the high school classroom, that I didn't have to give up that research aspect. I could just bring it along with me. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. In between, I did go to the University of Pennsylvania to get my master's in teaching. So I am kind of trained in the more classical sense of like classroom management, helpful teaching techniques, what works for some kids might not work for others, kind of the traditional topics. So I do have that teaching training to help me when I'm in the classroom. And of course I pull on that quite a lot. It was a master's in teaching certification program. So after I got my master's, I was ready to enter the classroom. And on a daily basis, it's a challenge. It's a stressful job, and I absolutely love it. I love figuring out how to get my students to understand something that to them is really, really hard. Physics is hard, right? And to a high school student, it seems like, I'm just going to be bad at this. You know, it's just too hard. And when they can overcome that and prove to themselves that they can do physics, it's really empowering, and it changes them. So that's what inspires me.
Can I add a comment also to that on the previous? So there's the feeling of feeling, do you feel that you belong in a certain room? But that's also very closely coupled to the feeling of feeling dumb. And that's something that happens to me probably every day. And so think of that as normal. It's not whether or not you belong because of your gender or anything else. Probably all your classmates experience this. Hopefully they experience this feeling of, I don't quite understand what's going on here. If you don't experience that, you're not learning anything, right? So take it up that way also, that sometimes you feel you don't understand what's going on, but it's not because of your gender, it's because it's hard. And overcome that is key.
And can I add to that? Sorry. I think men have a way of not putting themselves out there as much, because I distinctly remember first course in grad school, I was blown out of my mind. I'm like, oh my God. And I remember having the first exam and having, two guys specifically come out, and they were smiling and they were like, yeah, I did good. I made it through grad school, and after a year they were gone. And so somehow we feel like we have to share with the world, because if I don't tell you how I feel, I'm being dishonest. If I somehow show, make it seem like I am more confident than I am, better than I am lying to you. No, don't do that. Every one of us and every one of them does feel dumb, and they just have a way of not having it get out there and not having it be part of the conversation as much.
For those who have studied physics education, what are some ways to sort of bring these more innovative methods into the classroom or into the lecture hall? Because I've seen a lot of research done through just looking at surveys and actual research part of it, but I haven't seen it implemented as well as I think it should be.
Are you talking about the college classroom or the high school classroom?
Both, either.
I can speak from personal experience about the high school classroom at least. What I taught last year is not what I'm teaching this year, and I'm changing how I'm teaching because my students are changing, because there's new cool stuff out there to be teaching, because my own thinking has changed. So for me, those cool, new, innovative techniques that research is pumping out, let's try them. If it doesn't go well, we'll remediate it. If it goes really well, I'll do it next year. So you're not going to know until you try it if it really works for you, your teaching style, for your students, for your classroom. So I've almost turned my classroom into a little experiment for me. What's going to work best for you guys? technology in the classroom, I try almost everything.
So at the college level, I love teaching. I love experimenting with teaching. There are people in this room who've been subjected to that. One of them is sitting right in front of you. And I would also, so come and talk in the break if you like. But I also want to point out to you guys that we have Tim McKay, who's sitting right here. And he's an expert in analyzing the effectiveness of teaching. And he's also a great teacher. So we'll talk with him too.
And if I could add, as an education researcher, find a community of people who are interested in thinking about their teaching. So there are going to be, wherever you are, the high school or the college, people who want to think about how to make their teaching better. And there are some larger communities, like the American Association of Physics Teachers is a twice-yearly conference that draws both high school teachers and professors who do regular physics, but are also interested in how they can improve their teaching as part of their job. So you don't have to invent it from scratch.
So my question is for anyone, how do you deal with burnout? How do you not get burned out, especially when you're plagued by ideas of feeling dumb or feeling doubts of, am I capable of this?
In case some people couldn't hear, the question was, how do you deal with burnout? So I don't know. Now you made me feel down. So life has ups and downs. No matter what you do, there'll be things that make you feel really great about what you're doing, and other times where you feel like, why in the world am I doing this? And you work through these things. I don't think it's specific to physics, but probably when you're doing something like research, you do go through these periods where you find that there are just times where you try all these things, you run out of ideas, and I don't know, then what really helps for me, I think, is teaching. I can feel burned out about something, but at 9 o'clock in the morning, I gotta deliver. And some people depend on me for that. And then going and doing a good class, that gives me energy. So finding, I think the conclusion from that as I'm talking is you find things that you like to do, and you make sure that they fit into your life also, and do those things too.
And for me, I recently came to this realization when I was very stressed out at 6 a.m. trying to figure out what I'm teaching that day. That it's a really stressful job. My job is stressful. It's challenging, and there are many times when I'm like, I need to not have students in my classroom right now. I need some alone time. But I like that. Like, I like the challenge of it. That's something that I enjoy, is that it doesn't come easy to me. So to kind of recognize, like, I'm struggling right now, but in the big picture, like, I actually like that. It's okay to struggle, and to kind of own that moment, and know that if it came easy, you wouldn't be happy, even though you might wish it wasn't.
If I can take a different swipe at it, so it depends on what you mean by burnout. Some people would say that when at the end of my postdoc I decided that I didn't want to do academia, that I got burnt out and I wanted to go into industry. So I think it's good to know whether your unhappiness is often enough that it's really a signal, right? I mean, all of us at some point might make a decision that when I was young I thought I would become X, but now I really don't want to become X, I'm going to become Y. So I think it is good to take the information and see, okay, am I unhappy all the time? Am I, is it really that I'm comparing myself to other people? Is it that I'm really unhappy about what I'm doing? But if you realize that it's not a big signal, and you're trying to look through something to get you through, do remember that it passes. I keep thinking of ourselves, we're just a bag full of chemicals. I mean, that's really all we are. And as someone who, goes through the normal, cycle of things, there are some days that I just look in the mirror and I look good, We're good. And then like 2 days later, nothing has changed and I look terrible. And I'm like, so realize that, your brain is constructing affecting the world around you, and your view has everything to do with whether something is good or bad. So just try to take some of those layers away, and if the unhappiness isn't something major, then you just go right through it, and you find something else that, you know, makes it good, and it's worth it, right? I mean, it is worth it to go through it.
I think that's really good advice. Listen also to it. If you really think that's always bad, then maybe you want to do something different. I mean, but if you have a drive for getting through it, if you have that happiness. I spent a month once looking for a fact that one had in a research project, and I was you know, angry and sad and messed up in all sorts of different ways. And then we found so the more the better, right? This is a kind of my hand, right? But yes, listen to your signals.
And on a really short-term basis, if you're banging your head against a wall about something, go off and do something else. Take a yoga class, go swimming, go shopping, whatever, and then come back to it, you know, when you're a little less burned out.
My question is kind of directed to anyone. I know it sounds like from talking to a lot of you and a lot of people out at the poster session, you don't really know what you want to do with physics until you kind of happen upon it. But in the meantime, what do you decide to sign up for? And how do you get the research opportunities when you have no idea what you want to do?
Are we talking classes?
Like classes and applying for internships and jobs.
Classes are easy, right? Like, no, I say that because you gotta take quantum and you gotta take, you know, so I guess if I didn't know, I would go by what, because there's a minimum list of classes you gotta take, so I would kind of go by that. But, so you remember when I talked about the quantum mechanical test and how, you know, that made me feel warm and fuzzy? I mean, you know, if you really have no other way of knowing, you know, when you read the research description or whatever that is, just see whether one gives you that feeling of, okay, you know, I like this better. But know that I had colleagues in grad school, as I said, I was lucky that I went into this group that sounded cool and it turned out to be totally cool. I had another friend who for 2 years was in a field and decided that no, she wasn't going to do it. So she started back up again, and there was a guy who did that after a year. So you're right, you don't know until you get in there, so don't be afraid of that, right? So many people don't know what they're getting into while they get there. The more information you have, the more you can make the really important decisions when it comes to grad school and when it comes to everything like that. And don't be afraid to say, oh, it was a wasted summer. It's not really wasted. So that's my 2 cents.
So Kate mentioned you take some chances and you explore, and sometimes you hit the right thing, sometimes you hit the wrong thing, and it is really hard to know. I came into grad school thinking, how can anybody spend their career studying black holes? I knew a little bit about what black holes were, and you can have things go around them, and so what? I mean, what else can you possibly do with them? And then I did my PhD in black holes. I worked on it for many years. So sometimes you just even don't know until you start getting into the layers of the onions and see what is in there, and you don't even know exactly what tricks you. I mean, what intrigues you in terms of what you want to pursue before you get into that detail and really get your hands dirty on it. So get your hands into things.
I actually, I worked under Tim McKay on physics education research, and I came to him because I wanted a summer job because I didn't want to move home with my parents. And I came to him, and I literally had Wikipedia'd astrophysics because, like, he was an astrophysicist. I saw it on the website. And so I knew, like, 2 terms about astrophysics because I've taken physics classes, and I took 1 astronomy class, so I'm astrophysics, right? And thank goodness that it happened to turn out that he also researches physics education. And so it worked out, but like at the time I was just looking for a summer job. And it turned into, you know, a 3-year sort of really great research experience that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So I think looking back, it's very 2020, you know, everything turned out and I had a plan all along. No, absolutely not. There was Wikipedia involved. Sorry, Tim. goal is to like be a human being and not spend all my time at school, which is a constant struggle because there's always something more to do. I set a timer for myself when to leave school so that I go home and I see my boyfriend and I go work out. And I do parkour, which is like the moves, right? And it's the only way I can get my brain to turn off at night because otherwise I'll just keep thinking about school. So I schedule activities purposefully so that I have a life outside of my work. And I think I'm a better teacher because of that, because I'm human, because I have these experiences that I can tell my students about. You know, I'm an American Ninja Warrior, and then they think I'm the coolest person ever. So it's very purposeful to have this work-life balance and to know when it's okay to stay at school super late, because this is just going to be an awesome lesson. I will not regret that. And when I need to say, I'm not even being as productive as I could be. I need to go home. I need to take a nap, and then I need to go to parkour. It's a conscious process. I don't know about family. I don't have any. Well, I have family.
I think this is the one we should all answer. So.
Okay. So I think that's very important. You do things that you enjoy to do. You may see many of your professors as people who stand in front of you, and they look like they do physics all the time. and they probably do spend a lot of time in physics. It keeps amazing me also when I meet my colleagues, and I find that many of them are really skilled musicians. And before they went into physics, they were almost on a path to a professional career. So some are really exceptional in that way. And other people have other interests. Some are elite sports people. They spend enormous amounts of time racing around on their bicycle, which is something I really enjoy too, and that's one thing that helps clear my head in the summer. Many of my colleagues play squash, and we head over to the gym, and I have a senior colleague who likes beating the younger colleagues. That's hilarious. And so you do your best to beat him the next time. So you know, there are all these things, and I never felt that there was a choice that either I had to do this or get married or, you know, it was not like that. You spend a lot of time on what you enjoy, and one of the things that I'm assuming, or that probably many of you guys really, really enjoy is physics. So think about that, and there was a question up back from Julia early on also about, you know, how do you decouple a little bit, and how, you know, and you schedule things that you enjoy doing. You schedule your balance. But if you have that signal that you don't like doing physics, you should also listen to that. So anyway, long digression, but it's not necessarily a choice. I think almost all the women in our physics department, in fact, women faculty, statistically, almost everybody has kids and a family, and we have probably about 20% women on the faculty. So I don't have kids, but everybody else does. So ask Christine when he comes. She can answer us.
Moderator.
I will ask Christine to answer you.
So I don't have children. My late husband and I had the two-body problem, so we were both PhD physicists. And people deal with that different ways. Sometimes you decide one person's going to have a harder time to find the job, so they get to lead and the other person follows. Other people do what we did, which is we sort of took turns. Like one person gets to pick where the postdoc is, and the other person has to make do, and then the next person gets to job search. And so that was how we, and so there was a tension there, but we were both committed to trying to live together in the same location and both do interesting jobs.
So I don't say I don't have kids, I say I'm child-free. There's a really good thing to be said about that. I'm going to regret it at some point, but, and my better half is playing video games, probably. The good thing was that I didn't have the two-body problem. So for me, I didn't have to make those really hard decisions. So kudos to you guys for making those just really hard. But, and I was a physics nerd geek, so for the longest time, physics was my hobby. I mean, that's all I, in a way, cared about. So then when I got older and I realized that I had a hard time coming up with a hobby, to be honest with you. I have a hard time decoupling. I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't fall asleep and my brain is up. So, but I did find novels, Daphne du Maurier, I highly suggest. And so, at some point, you do find ways of doing that. And I think what I want to tell you is, none of us have the answer, the answer. For some reason, when I was younger, I thought that I would get to a certain age, much younger than I am right now, and everything would be done. Like, all the decisions would be taken care of. I would be X, Y, and Z, and I would be X, Y, and Z for the rest of my life, and I would know exactly what to do. And when I'm reminded of how old I am, I cannot believe it, because someone as old as me should be a lot more mature and should be a lot more together than I am. These decisions that we make, they don't have a right or wrong answer, and we just make them because we have to make them. So it's good. So one of the best things that I heard recently was, don't worry as much about making the right decision. Once you make the decision, put all of your effort into making it right. So don't think that the rest of us can make a better decision than you when the tough questions come along. Just make the best that you can and then try to make it work.
Okay, I want to preface my remarks by saying that I hope this was not aimed at women physicists. The question you asked is absolutely generic, and there's no reason whatsoever that the same question shouldn't apply to men as well. That being said, my husband and I were really lucky in that we did find jobs in the same city that we both liked, and once we found those jobs, pretty much we stayed in them. I mentioned I was at the University of Chicago originally. After a year and a half there, my boss said, "Oh well, why don't you go work for our colleague whom we were collaborating with at Argonne?" And I've been there ever since. So we in fact bought a house and we settled down, put down roots. We have 2 daughters, and we luckily found childcare in the neighborhood when they were very small. And the best thing that happened was that Leon Letterman at Fermilab, where my husband works, started a daycare center when our older daughter was 2.5 years old, and she was there the first day they opened. And it was even good in that they ended up having a kindergarten, so we never had a problem of, can you pick your kid up at noon? I don't think so. And the other really good thing about having childcare at one's husband's location is they charge extra if you leave your kid there after 5:30, which meant that all of the men and it was mostly men whose kids were there, had to get home for dinner. That was amazing because I don't know if you know a lot of high energy physicists, but the one I'm married to can't tell time. And so left to his own devices, he would just show up at 8 or 9 or 10, and so it was a really good system.
Henriette asked me to respond, and I think you make compromises to accommodate a relationship. My husband has certainly sacrificed a lot, and he left his country to follow me to the U.S., leaving his family and friends and a job he really loved, and he's followed my career, even though I turned down some job opportunities that would have been really good career opportunities for me. I wanted to give him more stability, but again, when we came here, he was following me, and so he's still trying. I mean, he's gainfully employed. He's not exactly where he'd like to be in his career, so you find ways to make it work. And I know, yes, I was a double major in music, and I used to play when I was in college. I played more than 20 hours a week. I was playing, and I don't do that now. So the last time I gave a recital in public, which was with my husband actually, who plays piano, was when I was pregnant with my first child. And you prioritize. So right now I decided, he's 10 now, and my younger one's 7. And so I made a conscious decision that I'm prioritizing my family, my career right now. And so I play in my living room. We had a guest over. We were almost singing at the piano just on Thursday night actually, which was a lot of fun. But I'm not out there signed up going to 2 hours of rehearsal a week and performing at concerts or whatever. So, but I certainly spend, I guess, a lot of my time outside ends up being time away from physics, ends up being now doing things with my family. My kids are at a good age now to do a lot of stuff that's also older one had just turned 3, and the younger one was a baby, and he was totally bored because I think he just assumed all grown-ups could do all those acrobatics. But you know, when you're 3, grown-ups can do all sorts of things. But so right now, a lot of my time away, detaching from physics and being very excited by it. So we can move on to another question here. Yes?
Yeah, I'm curious about when you're doing postdocs or writing a grant for research or something like that, within that you have to give yourself a salary. And that always seems like a really bizarre thing to me. How do you ask for, I've lived for the past 12 years on a restaurant server salary, and I can even call it a salary, and so I don't know how in the world would I ask for tens of thousands of dollars for myself. That just seems bizarre to me. How does all of that work?
So we're going to a question about salary negotiation.
So I guess I can, okay, so for postdocs, a postdoc offer comes with a number for the salary, and so there's usually no negotiation on that one. So that's easy. Now, then there is, as a professor, when you're writing grants and so on, you have, the typical way it works in the US is that you pay 9 months for your salary, and then you apply for a grant to pay you 2 months over the summer. And you don't get to decide how much it is. It's 2/9 of that regular salary that you have. So there's no question of what it's pretty much set. Now, then Christine, I said, let's turn it into a question about negotiations. And in my experience, there's not a whole lot to negotiate about because, there's a number. You can look up what the averages are. For public universities, you can look up what the salaries are if you want to. And you can see, if you're very curious, you can ask yourself where you sit compared to your colleagues and so on and so forth. But it usually doesn't create happiness. You can make it feel good. It's like, yeah, I'm getting more than X. But man, why is Y being paid so more? It doesn't contribute to your personal happiness much to know that information.
I was more asking though, like if you're doing independent research,
Yes,
I
yes.
independently want to get money from whoever will give me money. I've got to work if I'm not working for necessarily an institution or whatever, I would need to figure that out somehow.
Yeah, I don't have much experience with that. I think it's very difficult to probably get funding from federal agencies as an independent researcher without any affiliation to actually get funding, especially for salary. So, sure.
Hi, I just wanted to add something to what Henriette was saying. It doesn't add to your personal happiness to know what other people are making. I totally agree. But I also spent 4 years as a small college administrator doing salary negotiations. Guys ask for more money. Women, much less frequently. Don't feel bad asking. I don't think people are going to retract an offer if you ask for more money. They may say, no, there's just no way that's going to happen. You can listen to that. You say, well, what about some more money for startup funds? Or what about an extra little space for research? Or maybe some computers or a guarantee of 2 students. That negotiation skill is one place where women are not coached the same as men. So when you get to the point of applying for jobs, think about looking for a coach who will help you figure out what you can ask for. You won't always get what you ask for, but you should be asking.
Yeah, I agree with that. You should be asking. When you're in a negotiation situation for, say, for postdoc, I think there really isn't much wiggle room. But for a faculty position, so let's zoom ahead some years from now, and you guys are out there looking for faculty jobs, getting an offer, then there is room, but it's not, I want more because I want more. That's not the argument. The argument is, I'd like to hire 2 students and the postdocs, and I need this thing so I can build that machine, and I also need a lab that does that. You say what you need for the scientific reasons that you need it, and that's how you negotiate things like your startup. For your salary, I certainly also I did my research. I looked up what the average salary was in different schools at this university, and I said, this is what it is. And then the person who was the chair at the time said, well, look, this is what the other assistant professors in the department are making. I can't bump you up really above those, and so this is it, and so I got a little bit more. But, but it was sort of, you know, I think it's not a place where the margin is bigger when you're looking at the startup, what it is that you actually need to perform your job, and that you should absolutely negotiate.
Do you have any negotiations involved in your
Yeah,
salary or other aspects of your
Yeah,
job?
so the one point I want to make is, at least for you, no, I know because it's a public school, you can look up your professor salaries. I mean, it's you know, so if you go for a job, I think that's a good way of saying there's another professor out there, assistant professor, who is in the same position as I am right now, so that gives you an idea of what's going on. So it's really important to know how much you're gonna make. For some reason, I still think of physics as a calling, but I think because I'm older than you by quite a lot, I used to think that if I asked for more money, it was a sign that I didn't care about physics, that the money was what was important. Now, I think now we realize that that's not really the case, right? You know, it's not an issue. So don't think that asking for money somehow says that you're not as interested in the job. It has nothing to do with that, to a certain extent. So yes, please ask for the money. Worst comes to worst, they say, nah, we're just gonna stick with what, you know, we offered. I mean, it's really rare for them to pull an offer. I've heard of one case, but, so in my case, when I went to Ford, I had 3 job offers, and I did a terrible job of doing the negotiation and everything else, because I was still in the phase of, I'm in the physics department, I do not care about money, I care about, you know, all the other kind of stuff. So what I did was, I looked at the 3 job offers, told Ford, hey, this guy's gonna give me more, so give me that much. I didn't do the cost of living adjustment, I'm just saying, you know, some of those things are. So yeah, I somehow thought that my boss would think less of me for asking for money, and especially in industry, maybe not as much in academia, but especially in industry, that's not the case. So ask for more money.
And in industry, you need to do the research and find out what people make in that job, and then you're making the case that you were worth it because you bring certain skills or experiences that they need.
But I gotta tell you, it's really hard. Every now and then APS sends out a survey for how much, you know, depending on your age and the number of years of in career you've had, how much money you have made. Or I look up, you know, like the Society of Automotive Engineers pulls that out. And I mean, the range is huge. And you don't know where you are because you don't know whether you're the younger in that level or not. So I'm just saying it's a wonderful thing to do, but man, it's really, really hard. It has big error bars. So just remember that as women, you're gonna underestimate yourselves, up the price.
Do you have a comment?
I had a comment on this. I also wanted to say that many places, even at universities, there's a lot of understanding for that you should not go down in salary. So if you're coming from somewhere, coming into a job, that's another way to negotiate. That, I mean, even within, any place has some range of salaries for hiring person X. And if you have made more, then you should certainly say that. That's part of negotiating with the hire.
That's a big thing at the national labs. Go to industry first if you want to make some money, because otherwise you end up lower paid than your colleagues.
So people couldn't hear the comment. It was that if you're making more money at a job, a previous job, make sure you make a new employer aware of the salary you're getting previously. And another comment?
Yeah, and also one thing you might not know when you're applying, especially in academia, you go from being the person who's begging for the job and vying for the job to, if they make you an offer, they want you. And they don't want to lose you, and they don't want to have to do a new search. That's the time that you negotiate. Too many women think, oh, once I'm there and I won't make waves and then I'll ask for something. You have no bargaining power. So especially if you have a partner who needs a job in the same city or at the same institution, or you're the partner who's following a spouse who's been offered the job, the time to get what you want is when there's an offer on the table and it hasn't been accepted yet. That's when you have your power. And too many people think they're gonna wait, oh, I'm coming in as the trailing spouse. It doesn't sound very good. And once you get there, they've got you both. They don't have to give you anything. So you ask when the offer is on the table. And remember too that it may seem like you're only asking for a little bit at the beginning, but your first salary is what all subsequent salaries are based on, and it grows and grows and grows until at some point you realize, as I did very recently, okay, so I'm doing all this research on bias against women in the sciences. I teach in the English department, and I thought, let me look at my salary. I was earning $25,000 a year less than the guy who had been hired the same day I was hired, who was doing the same work. $25,000 a year less. And you know, that's a lot of money. That's my share of that was my share of my son's college education each year. You know how much extra you have to teach each year to make that 20, and that's in English. So it is important. Don't be ashamed to ask. Ask when you have the offer on the table. That's when they want you. And remember that it really built up over the years you know, if you're not asking at the beginning and not asking later. So sorry.
I think we get one last question in. White shirt.
Yeah, so one thing that I want to do in my life is like travel quite a bit on my own terms, like to where I want to go, when I want to go, and like devote a few years to that. And I don't know how that would fit with a career in physics and chemistry, which is not a major at all. So, any ideas?
Become a teacher because you get the summer job. Going to Europe. That was part of the appeal to me, that during the summers I get to structure my own time. And yes, I work during the summer. It's not completely off. I think every teacher, in fact, does a lot over the summer that they are unpaid for. And but I get to structure that time. So I get to go to Europe.
I get to do a lot of professional traveling, but I'm actually pretty conservative. I say no to a lot of opportunities to go, just because I like also just getting things done. So, but there are a lot of opportunities in traveling in science, but it sounded like what you wanted to do was more take 2 years off and just do your own thing. And there are different strategies. I think the best advice I would give you is talk to your professors, and like that's advice for everybody. Ask questions. Go and take advantage of the fact that you're at universities where there are people who have a lot of experience, and go and ask all of them what are your questions. Don't be shy. It's the job to help them. So go ask some advice from people. Talk with people during the breaks. You can do it between your bachelor's and grad school. It's harder to do perhaps after grad school, but have a plan for what you want to do.
So I agree that the best time is in between the transitions. I mean, even that makes it a little difficult. Maybe if you have to extend your acceptance to grad school, but that would be really, really hard to do. And one of the issues is women take time off to have children, and they get, I don't want to say punished for it, but they're taking time off. They're making a life decision to spend more time at home, and because of that, their advance in the organization isn't as fast as it should be. And I think that's perhaps fair in the sense that if you're there, if you're gone for 2 years, it's a different situation than if you were there for 2 years, if you're there only for 4 days a week. So forgive me for being frank about this, but if you really want to do that, be ready to pay for it. Because the worst thing is for you to expect that that situation is going to be accepted by some employer or by some grad student situation. Because it's the same advice I would give to someone if they told me that they wanted to go and get a degree in a really tough field that is going to have a low chance of having them get a job. You're more than welcome to do it. If you feel that calling, go for it. But then do not expect to have the same, I don't know, retirement funds and the same ability to do that. So in my industry, if you wanted to do that, that would be hard. That would be like, I'm leaving a job, and then 2 years later, I'm applying fresh for that job again. So just beware. Sorry to end on a sad note.
Yeah.
Have one more question
We need to go. All right. Okay, we need to move on. Let's thank our panelists again.
I think that if there are other questions, maybe for like